Premier, we're hearing from immigrant communities that some of them are quite upset about some of the, well, all of the referendum questions you're putting forward on immigration, including Dr. Raj Sherman, who says that they're divisive and this is not what Alberta needs right now. He's actually calling for new leadership, a new Premier. How do you respond to that, and why is it important to put those questions forward at this time?
Well, I wish Justin Trudeau had put the question forward when he upended 40 years of established immigration policy, but he didn't. He increased and basically took all the limits off all of the temporary program streams, international students, temporary foreign workers, especially low skill, as well as asylum seekers. And as a result, we ended up with an imbalance. Our historic system gave points based on an individual's ability to integrate seamlessly into the economy. They had to have certain job skills, they had to have facility in one of the 2 official languages, and that was the priority. And what we see instead is that our repeated calls to return to that priority have been ignored. We have been asking for some time to have about 30,000 provincial nominees chosen by the province, very similar to what Quebec does, in order that we can provide the demand that we're seeing for provincial nominees, including since we have a large number of Ukrainian evacuees who settled here. And they keep saying no. In fact, instead of increasing the number, they keep decreasing it. And so they're going in the wrong direction. And so what we are asking for is, can we have and should we have a style of immigration agreement with Ottawa that replicates the 1991 agreement that Quebec has with Ottawa. Since 1991, Quebec has had total control primarily over economic migrants. Now, they make a choice to bring somebody in based on whether or not they can speak French so that they can integrate into the economy. We want to make a choice based on whether someone has a job and is able to begin work as a taxpayer and then ultimately move on to permanent residency and then ultimately citizenship. And we need to see a dramatic reduction in all of those other streams. Unfortunately, the federal government agrees. I mean, and anyone who's complaining about this hasn't been watching what's happened since Prime Minister Mark Carney got in. We have seen a decrease in the number of temporary foreign workers, and they're willing to collaborate with us, a decrease in the number of international students. We still have more work to do on asylum seekers and who pays for the long-term support of those asylum seekers as they're waiting to see whether their claim is legitimate. But we want to have control over economic migration because the current system got blown up in the last few years, and we're asking Albertans, which was something they should have been asked a few years ago when all the policies changed, whether they want to go back to something that approaches a more normal immigration policy like we had for 40 years.
Thank you. We'll go to our next with the mic.
Thanks, Lisa Johnson with Canadian Press. Just to keep you at the mic, Premier, on that topic. Do you know, or can you say for certain that the immigration policies you're putting forward on the referendum ballot, if they are constitutional? And I'm asking just because Minister Amory, it was a little bit unclear. He wasn't able to say last week if the results would be binding. So can you say for sure that they are constitutional questions?
Well, I can tell you that Section 95 is a section of the Constitution that we've not tested before. And it does have 2 areas of jurisdiction that are joint. And if you read it, it says that the province shall make laws, which seems to imply that the province should take the lead on policies regarding agriculture and on policies regarding immigration. And the language that they use for the federal government is the federal government shall make laws from time to time. And so it does seem to me that Quebec is the only one that is exercising the spirit of what that meant, is that you have to have the provincial leadership role in ensuring that newcomers match the needs of the economy, and then the federal government ultimately determines citizenship, asylum seekers, and some of those other aspects. And so I would say that if there is any kind of constitutional discussion, I guess we can battle it out in the courts, but it's already been well established in Quebec since 1991 that they do have the right to do it, and we do too. When it comes to the other ones, those of course cannot be done unilaterally. If you look at the abolition of the Senate, which is one of the issues that's on the table, that would have to be done with an agreement, I believe, of all the provinces and the federal government. So it requires unanimous. There's different amending formulas. The other issues around asserting that provincial laws should take paramountcy over federal laws in our areas of jurisdiction, that would require the amending formula of 7 out of 10 provinces representing 50% of the population. Same with opting out of federal programs and receiving the money for it. That might be a negotiation that we can have as opposed to a constitutional amendment. And the appointment of judges. I believe that also would require all of the provinces to agree, and we're already hearing that other provinces are in agreement with us on that. So we want to move forward on some of the things that we heard during the Alberta Next panel, some of the ways to reset our relationship with Ottawa, create a new relationship, so that people can have hope again, that Canada can work. That's one of the things that we're seeing, is people are very frustrated, and this is our answer to addressing some of the legitimate concerns and grievances that Albertans expressed to us.
Hi, Premier. I'm just curious. Yesterday, Thomas Lukaszuk, he doubled down on his comments comparing your approach and your rhetoric on immigration to those used by Nazis, and he said that he hoped that it made you reflect a little bit. Could you comment on that?
Well, I hope he would reflect on the reaction from the Jewish community, including the Edmonton Jewish community. If you're going to invoke Nazis and Holocaust, you better be talking about real Nazis and the real Holocaust, which caused devastation to the Jewish community. And so he should apologize and stop using that language and have a mature discussion about what it is that we're trying to address here. The mature discussion is we have a problem. We have a problem that oil revenues are unstable at the moment because of decisions of previous years of governments, his included, that we ended up with over-reliance on oil and gas revenues. We're trying to correct that by having a long-term plan with the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, by building pipelines that should have been built over the past 10 years, but weren't because of actions by the NDP Liberal Coalition in Ottawa. And so we don't want the same lost 10 years going forward, and I'm happy to have an MOU that looks like we're going to see a number of pipeline projects go ahead. That's a midterm solution. But the short-term solution is we have to have really tough questions being asked and answered about how we make sure that newcomers are able to integrate into our economy, and when they arrive that they've got a job and supports in order to be able to do that. Because of the policies of the federal government over the past 3 years under Justin Trudeau, we've ended up seeing a complete upheaval in what people came to expect of how our immigration was supposed to work. So we are asking Albertans, since it's a change, should we be taking over the economic migrant portion of immigration away from the federal government, similar to the way Quebec did back in 1991? And should we be putting some limitations over how long you have to be in our province before you start relying on social programs? But social programs are expensive. The average person who comes to Alberta needs about $6,000 a year in healthcare, and sometimes it varies. Some people need very little. Sometimes people need hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why we have an average. But there's always a certain portion that are going to be at either end of that. It costs $12,000 for someone to go through and get support in our childcare system. It costs $12,000 for a child to get support in our K-12 education system. The only place where we do have foreign students paying their way is in universities. And so we're just looking at having the same kind of policies that we see elsewhere. In Ontario in particular, they do not allow the families of temporary foreign workers to automatically get access to health care. The federal government just recently issued a circular saying temporary foreign workers are expected to have private insurance when they come here. And it just stands to reason. If you're going to a country temporarily, every Canadian knows you've got to get yourself covered for insurance. You don't show up on the doorstep of another country and say, hey, pay for my health care, pay for my kids' education. We just need to have the same kind of normal policies that they have in other jurisdictions.
Thanks. And then my follow-up on that, it's a referendum question, but it's not immigration on this one. It goes to the question on abolishing the Senate. I know it was one of the recommendations of the Alberta Next panel, and so I guess I'm speaking to you as the Premier, but also the chair of the Alberta Next panel. The survey showed only 7% support for the government advocating for the abolishment of the unelected Senate. And so I'm just curious what made you decide to put that question on this referendum.
Well, I guess we have to ask if we're going to continue the charade of having Senate elections every election cycle and having it ignored by the federal government. And I guess we have to ask ourselves, are we going to live with the charade of pretending at some point Quebec is going to agree to have the same number of Senate seats as we do, and that the Senate is going to be equal and elected and effective? I know that there are a number of people who maintain that hope, but it costs money for candidates to run in that election. And if they're just going to be ignored, then why are we doing it? And if they're just going to be ignored, then what's the Senate for? The Senate was always supposed to be to represent regional interests, if you go back in the history books. And in point of fact, it's not. Right now, it's a partisan chamber. And the people who are appointed probably wouldn't be able to get elected to public office. And I question whether or not they actually represent the views of the majority of Albertans and advocate on our behalf consistently. So that's what I'm putting to Albertans is, do we want to continue doing Senate elections? And if that's what they decide, okay, I guess we'll have another Senate election on the next ballot. But if not, then I'll be advocating for something different.